Hey guys, welcome to episode 2 of my personal journey and solution series. Today's episode is how to naturally conquer depression from someone who's actually done it. Hopefully this video will help you avoid the trap of depression because it could get really nasty really quick. And my disclaimer is that, as the title states, this is my personal experience and personal solutions. What I do can and will probably help you, but you have to be willing to change and accept some new ideas. My personal journey definitely is not for everybody. So if you don't think it'll work for you, then I highly encourage you to go find someone else who has a story that will work for you. But anyways, let's get right into it. So what exactly is depression? Before we go into fixing it, we have to define what it means. Depression is when someone is emotionally depressed, which prevents them from living the life that they normally live. Now I want to clarify, feeling depressed and having depression are two very different things. If something bad happens, then yeah, you feel sad and you get over it. That's feeling depressed. But depression actually involves a series of 3 things, which I'll define later in the video. It's more of a cycle, a downward spiral. Depression is like being in a really deep pit, unable to climb out, no matter how hard you try. And that's how it feels, at least. So now that we understand how it kind of feels and how it kind of works, let's get into how people become depressed. And you might be saying like, oh, it's not that complicated. Something bad happens and then they become depressed, but it's more complicated than that. There are actually 3 phases of depression. There's the cue, there's the stop, and then there's a compound. The cue is the negative thing that initially happens to trigger it. Very commonly, it's a close relative passing away. I'm not saying that you shouldn't feel sad if that happens. It's completely normal, and it's unrealistic to say that you shouldn't feel that. But when you do this next part, when you stop living your life the way you used to, that's when it becomes a problem. So a close relative passes away. And because of that, a lot of people, they'll stop. They stop hanging out with friends. They stop hanging out with family. They stop socializing. They stop leaving their room, and they stop all the hobbies that they used to enjoy. Now think about what that actually does. You're taking away all the things that gave you fulfillment and enjoyment out of your life. All the healthy things that kept you happy in the first place. So without those things, what else is there? I can see how people get depressed. They take away everything that made them happy. And all they have left to do is to think about that negative thing over and over and over. Like, oh, maybe it was my fault. Maybe I could have done this better. That's the downward spiral. And that's the third part of depression, which it compounds. Once you stop living life the way you did and you're just sitting in your dark room, all you have to do is think about that negative thing. And the guilt, the sadness, and emptiness will build up until you don't feel like you can breathe anymore. You don't feel like you can get out of bed. And from this point, it's honestly really hard to break. It takes a lot of mental strength. That's why I want to say, if you're starting to feel depressed, you have to nip it at the bud. Do not let the cycle compound like this. We can avoid the trap of depression if we don't let the stop phase occur, if we continue living life the way we intended to in the first place. Just remember that that relative wouldn't want you to stop living your life. That relative would want you to keep living. Even that could help you sometimes, just knowing that. So if a cue occurs in your life and you feel like you might be going into a depression cycle, you have to nip it at the bud. Make sure you keep living your life. In fact, it actually helps to actively try to go out there and socialize. You might have heard the phrase, you're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. If you're spending a lot of time with people who aren't depressed, that's going to rub off on you and you're going to feel a little bit better. So the way you avoid depression is to recognize that you're entering the cycle. I know it's hard, but you really have to keep trying to get yourself out there. To keep doing the things that you love doing. Because without the things that give you your happiness and fulfillment in the first place, you have nothing else to do but fall into a depressive cycle. And that's more destructive than anything else you could possibly do. Now we're going to talk about how you break depression, how you break any addiction or bad habit in general. And that's to redefine your identity and change the actions that you take. 2 things, identity and action. We're going to go into action first. It's easier to understand and it's pretty straightforward. So first you have to understand it's completely normal to feel the way you're feeling. You know, we're humans, we're not robots. If something sad happens, then we're going to feel sad. I know a lot of gurus on the internet will try to be tough and say, oh, self-discipline, just be a robot. But you're a human. It's unrealistic and it's stupid. And honestly, it will only lead to greater health issues down the road. So understand that it's normal and keep living your happy, fulfilling life. Even though it might feel hard sometimes. It might feel like you just want to stay in your room today. It might feel like you don't want to hang out with friends today. You have to get yourself out there. And that's the last part of the action plan, is to try to socialize. If you're not hanging around with depressed people, then you're not going to feel depressed. Birds of a feather flock together. But if your friends are depressed, then maybe you shouldn't hang around them. It goes both ways. It goes hand in hand. So that was a pretty simple and straightforward action plan. Now we're going to go into redefining your identity. And this is a little more complex. It's a little harder to do, but it is way more effective. You can accomplish anything in your life with identity changes. So the first thing is to never identify as a depressed person. I cannot stress how important this is. You are what you say you are. You probably have that family member that says, oh, I don't feel like it, or I'm just too lazy. I cringe whenever I hear things like that because they're just destroying themselves. It's self-destruction. Identifying yourself like that, because it fortifies what you just said about yourself. Like, oh, I'm lazy. Okay, well, now I'm lazy. I'm depressed. I don't want to go out today. Well, now you're depressed. It fortifies the belief that you are that thing, thus taking away your power. If you say you're depressed, then that takes away the power you have to change it. And that was your only hope of exiting the cycle. And there's only one way to regain that power that you lost. It's to shift your identity. To accept that depression is not real. Well, what do you mean, George? You just defined depression like it has to be real. You literally just explained it. Well, depression is defined as a mental illness, which is something that, you can't really change about yourself. It's like saying someone's bipolar. But the brain is a powerful thing. Like, we only know less than 1% of its actual capabilities. Your brain is so adaptable, it's beyond belief. You can break depression, which makes it a feeling and not a mental illness. So you regain your power by understanding that it's possible to break it, that it's not real. That gives you your power back because now you have the ability to change it, the ability to stop the cycle. Now that on its own could take years of practice, and it's really hard to do. It's a lot harder than you think. Now, changing your identity is not an easy thing. It's something you have to tell yourself over and over until it becomes part of your principles and beliefs, thus changing your actions and your feelings. But eventually you'll get there. Just keep telling yourself. Keep believing that depression is not real because you're right. It is not a mental illness. And once you understand that, you'll only feel depressed, which is just a temporary feeling, and it's not an unchangeable mental illness. And at that point, you're only in the Q cycle. And once you get to this point, you can go back in the cycle and you can start living the life that you used to live. You can get rid of the stop in the cycle, the stop of the things that you used to love. When you stopped doing the things that gave you fulfillment, you can start them again, and then the cycle will be broken. It won't be overnight. You'll still feel sad, but eventually you'll get back to living your normal life, and you'll forget that you were even recovering in the first place. You'll feel normal again. You'll feel happy again. So now that we're done with that part of the video, I want to talk about depressed people around you. You might be watching this because you have a depressed friend or family member or someone you want to help in general. Maybe you want to know how to help people. I want to tell you that you cannot help a depressed person. You can help yourself if you're starting to feel depressed, but you cannot help someone else. This is a conclusion that they have to reach on their own. Sure, you can send them this video, but are they even going to watch it? Are they just going to sweep it under the rug and continue to identify as a depressed person? Most likely, and that's the sad part. You can drag a horse to a trough, but you can't force it to drink. You cannot help the helpless. And it's not your job to. It is not your job to be the fixer-upper. You're being a good friend or family member by caring about them like that, but what you're doing is impossible. You're trying to change them, and that is not a good habit to have. So if there are depressed people around you, I advise just separating yourself from them. I know it sounds cold, but you're doing the right thing. This is a journey that you have to take on your own, and it's the same for anyone else. If you got value out of this, subscribe and comment your thoughts or any video requests you have. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for watching.